Big Noon Kickoff is from Champaign, Illinois. Big Noon Saturday. The featured matchup features the 21st ranked USC Trojans going on the road to Memorial Stadium in Champaign to face off against the 23rd ranked Illinois Fighting Illini. The Trojans are 6.5-point favorites. The over-under sits at 60.5 points. Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt, Jenny Taft, and the entire crew. Man, these are two teams, two fan bases that are feeling very different these days. Illinois started the season kind of floating right around the top 10. As recently as last week, they were inside the top 10 in the AP poll, whereas USC, they started the season outside of the AP poll, I believe. But USC just keeps on climbing, and everybody just in Trojan country keeps on feeling better and better and better about this team. And then Illinois, after that 53-point defeat at the hands of Indiana last week, well, maybe the feelings aren't exactly rainbows and unicorns in the state of Illinois this week. They had their fair share of injuries last week, and we're not sure where that's going to end up. We'll talk more about that as this preview progresses. But going back to USC, going back to Southern California, I mean, this offense just looks really good. They look really confident in what they're doing right now. It's one of the best offenses. It's one of the most efficient offenses right now in college football. And I talked about injuries for Illinois, but we know all about the experience coming back. It just maybe seems like there was a lot exposed last week for this Fighting Illini team. So you got two teams going in different directions, but what direction are they going to be going when this thing wraps up on Saturday? I think that is the big question. But you have this is the start of the stretch where we're going to find out more about USC. I think a big reason why everybody's feeling good, everybody's feeling positive, Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State. Yeah, that'll make a lot of teams in the Big Ten feel pretty positive, especially when you have the talent that USC does. So we're going to find out a lot about USC to see where they stack up against a fairly good squad. But for Illinois, we're going to find out a lot about them because how are they going to respond from last week? And that's where I want to get into really my second point in this preview is Indiana going to beat Illinois twice? Brett Bielema has to have his team focused and ready to go in front of the home crowd there in Champaign, because this is kind of a thing that could go two different directions for the Illini. This is a team that could come out and they could be pissed off, motivated, ready to prove that last week wasn't a fluke. Or they could let what happened last week kind of linger over against a USC team that has similar things to Indiana and how they can defeat this Illini squad. It was like, I was almost wowed. I had to double take so many times of what was happening in that Illinois-Indiana game because that's not something we see very often from a Brett Bielema coach team. So the smart money might tell you that's not something that we see 2 weeks in a row, and Illinois will bounce back, but there's a lot to learn, I think, from this game. I think one thing when I was kind of looking at the matchups and looking at all of these things that really stood out to me, and I kind of mentioned, hey, USC's got some things that Indiana had that can take advantage of the matchups versus Illinois. Specifically, USC's passing game and USC's defensive line, I believe, are advantages for the Trojans over the Illini in this matchup. I mentioned the injuries before. The health of Illinois' secondary is a question mark. I believe Brett Bielema said this week, 6 of their top 7 defensive backs were out at some point or another in that game against Indiana. And I think that's what kind of led to the big differential in points and what the final score read. I mean, he's like, I've never been through anything like that before, and that's tough. That's tough, especially when you have the secondary that they have. But we know Xavier Scott, he's not going to be able to go for a majority of the rest of the season. Miles Scott was out due to the targeting. Torrey Cox, Caleb Patterson, Matthew Bailey had some injuries. So we're just not sure of what the secondary is going to look like. I got a good feeling that we're going to see a lot of those guys back this week, but still we don't know. And you look at USC, they're the number 2 F+ offense in the country, and Jaden Mayava just looks like a totally different quarterback. Okay, who kidnapped a good quarterback and put him in a 14 jersey? I don't know. It certainly seems that way, but it goes to show you exactly what Lincoln Riley can do at the quarterback position. So considering what happened last week against Illinois secondary and the strength that USC has in the passing game, that's something that I believe USC can certainly exploit. But it sounds like Jacoby Lane may not be able to go. It looks like he was able to take the practice field out there on Tuesday, so that's certainly still up in the air. But you know Makai Lemon then. Without Jacoby Lane, Makai Lemon is going to be targeted early and often. He was mocked at the beginning of the year to be a first-round draft pick at wide receiver, and he has proven why thus far. He is dangerous when he gets the ball in space. He is an awesome receiver. I don't know if Illinois has a guy that can go man up on Makai Lemon right now. Without Jacoby Lane, I would expect Lake McCree to get a lot more looks this week, the tight end for USC. So that's kind of another matchup that Illinois certainly has to be able to keep their eyes on. Maiava leads the Big Ten in passing, over 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So all of that being considered, seems like a matchup advantage right now for USC. But what does Illinois need to do to be able to slow this down? Let's kind of tackle that. They need to unleash Gabe Ackus is what they need to do. He's got 3.5 sacks this season. He was a non-factor against Indiana, and he needs to be a factor. If he is a non-factor against USC, USC will win the game. I think that's a pretty simple thing to be able to say. On USC's offensive line, Elijah Page, their left tackle, left the game against Michigan State. He's been seen, has not been seen at practice so far this week. So he's maybe a little less confident to go than Jacoby Lane is right now. After he went out of that game against Michigan State, there was a lot of musical chairs moving around parts to get this offensive line to work. So if Gabe Ackus can have a much better game against USC than he did against Indiana, that could certainly play in favor of Illinois. You need to get this USC offense a little bit off schedule. You need to make Jaden Maiava uncomfortable. When Maiava's kept clean, or I should say this, Maiava has been kept clean on 78% of his dropbacks this season, and he completes 76% of his passes when clean, but just 47% when under pressure, which kind of goes back to last season when he was under duress and he was kind of running around a little bit. He wasn't quite as efficient and wasn't as good. And we've seen that a little bit. Although he hasn't been under pressure much, we've seen it a little bit this season as well. I think a way to combat that, right, the pass rush, and if they can kind of win those battles against the USC offensive line for the Trojans, is to be able to run the ball. They've been running it really well this season. Illinois hasn't been defending it very well. Illinois is giving up over 130 rushing yards per game. That's 13th in the Big Ten. Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders are a great combination, combined for nearly 700 yards and 5 touchdowns so far this season. So if you have a lot of aggressiveness coming off the edge, you can really slow that down with a great run game. And I think USC can get that run game going against Illinois. Now, you look to the flip side. I talked about how the passing game and the offense is maybe going to have an advantage for USC against Illinois. Let's head to the other side of the ball. This is a USC defensive line. They're playing really good right now, and they're really deep. Credit to their coaching staff, what they've been able to acquire, and also what they've been able to develop over there. You look at the Illini, an experienced offensive line, but right now it certainly just doesn't look like a good offensive line. They've given up 16 sacks through 4 games. They allowed 7 sacks versus Indiana. Now, that's a big number. A lot of numbers as it pertains to Illinois are inflated, but these other numbers, 9 sacks in 3 games allowed versus Western Illinois, Duke, and Western Michigan. So whether it's been higher caliber of competition like Indiana or lower caliber of competition, the offensive line hasn't really fared well either way. The Trojans have tallied 16 sacks this season. That's tied for most in the Big Ten. Braylon Shelby's got 3.5. Eric Gentry is just a beast. He leads the team in tackles as well with 27. Cameron Crawford, Anthony Lucas, they have over 2 sacks this season. I mean, Jakeem Stewart, every week we see a little bit more from Thanos and a little bit more and a little bit more of how he can wreak havoc on this defensive line. So Illinois' got to find a way to neutralize what this USC defensive line can really do up front. Because here's the thing about this. I don't think, Illinois is going to have a ton of success running the ball. Maybe they will, but it just doesn't seem like that matchup really plays in their favor to get Caden Fagan and Kaleo Valentine really out to a good game. But I think the matchup that Illinois needs to exploit is in the secondary. USC secondary has not been very good this season. The Trojans are giving up 231 passing yards per game. That's third most in the conference. Could be a big day for Hank Beatty. Could be a big day for Colin Dixon. And now you kind of put all those facts into a recipe, you put into the oven, what do you get? This could be a game that could produce a lot of offense. And although I think Illinois and Luke Altmaier can do that, that's a game plan and that's a structure of a game that I think fits more into the realm of USC right now. I tend to favor the Trojans getting the victory and Illinois suffering their second consecutive loss.